מזמור לדוד. אדוני רואי לא אחסר. בינות אשר ירביצני ימי מנוחות ינחלני. נפשי שובב. ינחני במגלי צדק למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגצל מוות, לא יירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנת בשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה, אך טוב וחסד ירדיפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. Friends, I have chanted for you the words of our 23rd Psalm. With hearts that are aching and in search of comfort and solace, we often turn to the psalmist. And so I invite you now to recite these words with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember her. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember her. In the opening buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember her. In the blueness of sky and in the warmth of summer, we will remember her. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember her. And when we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember her. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember her. So long as we live, she too will live, for she is now a part of us as we remember Ruth Kimmelman. To her children, to Alice and Laura, and also to Tom and Howard, to her brother Don, and to so many members of the family and dear and cherished friends. We've come together today to remember, but also to celebrate the life of your beloved Ruth. Our sages, in their wisdom, have taught us that birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey, from childhood to maturity and from youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. Ruth's journey began in Cleveland. She was born in 1921 to Louis and Lillian Zoss, and Ruth, along with her baby brother Don, grew up in a warm and loving home. Her earliest beginnings were in the famed Glenville neighborhood, but then the family moved east, first to Cleveland Heights and then to Shaker Heights, where they lived in a third-floor walk-up near Shaker Square. Don, you recall growing up with a sister who was really like a second mom to you. She was 7 years your senior. And Don, your family made their way through what most of us believe to be some of the most challenging, most difficult times in our nation's history. As the Depression years wore on, you knew that there were struggles, but you and Ruth never went hungry. Growing up, and even into your adult years, your sister would refer to you as her baby brother. And when you would find the occasion to send her flowers or some sort of holiday or birthday card, you would always sign the card, "From your baby brother." You remember a sister who was an excellent student, who was placed in what we might call the gifted program at Shaker Heights High School. And her creative writing skills were exceptional. And in more recent years, I know that her daughter Alice, after reading her mother's creative writing pieces, would often comment that these pieces were, and I'm quoting Alice, New Yorker magazine worthy. Don, you also remember a sister who was very popular. You said as a young girl, and especially in her teens, she had a lot of girlfriends. And Don, you remember that Ruth also had a number of friends who were boys. When the boys would stop by to visit your sister, it seems many of them gave you a nickel, sometimes even a dime, for you to just disappear. It seems that you made quite a bit of cash back in the day, Don, as your sister Ruth was the sweetest gal and a real looker. The two of you, Don, were always close. As children, you shared a bedroom in that Shaker Heights apartment. As adults, throughout your years, you chose to live in close proximity of one another. Whether it was for family celebrations at her house or Sunday morning breakfasts at your home, you and Ruth always were close in your hearts. Ruth, with her excellent grades and her high level of intelligence, she could have attended any college. She would not have had a problem being accepted to the college of her choice, but the family did not have the funds, and so, following her graduation from Shaker Heights High School, she entered into the workforce. Ruth's cousin, Avi, he had a buddy named Max Kimmelman. Cousin Avi wanted to fix up Max and Ruth. And at first Ruth scoffed at the idea. She teased a bit by saying to her cousin, "Max Kimmelman? What kind of name is that?" But after the teasing subsided, Ruth agreed to meet Max. Their first date was a blind date, and that was all it took. The attraction was instant, and they both were smitten. They dated about a year, and love easily blossomed between them. Ruth's birthday was approaching, and when Max said to his mother, "Maybe I should get her a robe for her birthday," his mother exclaimed, "A robe? Get her an engagement ring." And Max listened to his mother. Ruth and Max were married on November 20th, 1941, with Rabbi Armin Cohn officiating. As their wedding date indicates, they wed 2 weeks before the attack on Pearl Harbor. And there they were, newlyweds. And the family lore recalls that Max was relaxing on the sofa on December 7th when he heard the tragic news. And the very next day, Max enlisted. After completing basic training, Max was stationed in North Africa and then Italy, and he was away from his beloved bride and from the family for nearly 4 years. While Max was away serving our country, Ruth continued working. She was doing clerical work at the Cleveland Pneumatic Tool Company, and she lived with her parents and her brother, Don. And Don, you remember this time. You remember your sister and your dad playing gin rummy almost every night. They'd sit there and play, your father smoking his cigars, Ruth smoking her cigarettes. And by the way, those cigarettes that Ruth had been smoking in her 20s and 30s, years later when her daughters were quite young, I think, Alice, you were about 10 years old, and you drew up a petition for your mother that stated the following: Daddy goes to work and makes money. We want you to stop smoking. Maybe it was worded a little differently, but that's the gist. And Alice, at 10 years old, you signed the petition and you got your 4-year-old sister Laura to write a couple of letters as well. And from that moment on, Ruth never touched another cigarette. The war ended and Max returned home. And Alice and Laura, you remember your parents having a beautiful life together. Family, family, family. They had a vibrant social life, and the majority of it was centered on family. A big, loving, wonderful extended family. There were lots of cousins on both sides. The Zas family club moments were priceless. Friday night Shabbat dinners at the grandparents' and Sunday get-togethers were filled with fun and lots of music. There was always music, as the Zas side of the family was loaded with fine musicians. And one of these musicians was Ruth. She played piano by ear. She was good, but when it came to her specialty song, something called the Edelweiss Glide, she was excellent. Alice and Laura, you already know, but I will still state it, that the two of you were always the most precious gems in your mother's crown. When Alice was born, Alice, the joy you brought into your parents' world was immeasurable. And 6 years later, Laura arrived, completing this beautiful family portrait. The two of you grew up in a happy and incredibly fun home. You saw a mom and a dad who loved each other deeply and who respected one another. You were also blessed to grow up in a home where you never heard a cross word spoken between your parents. What a special blessing. Your mom and dad journeyed through life, but they also journeyed throughout the world. Your dad was a top salesman with Sealy Mattress, and through his hard work, he won many awards and trips. And so together, your parents traveled to places like Hawaii, Austria, Italy, Puerto Rico, Switzerland, and the list goes on. Your father's passing in 1977 was sudden and shocking. He was only 61 years old. In their 36 years of married life, Ruth and Max lived large, surrounded by family, friends, travel, and most importantly, their sweet daughters. Alice, you wanted to have a quote shared today, written by Strickland Gilliland, and you thought that these words were so appropriate. Gilliland writes, "You may have tangible wealth untold, caskets of jewels and coffers of gold. Richer than I you can never be. I had a mother who read to me." Alice, you and Laura have easily been the ones who you could have been the ones who penned this quote, because your mom was that mom. She read to you girls all the time. Her favorite book, which became one of your favorites as well, was a collection of poems by Rose Fileman. There was, of course, one particular that stood out over the rest. She read this to you so many times that I think you have it memorized. And in her final days, you read this poem to her. And while lying in her bed, she could still recite every word with you. The poem by Rose Fileman is entitled Fairies and Chimneys. You know the smoke from chimneys? It often isn't smoke. It's nothing but the fairies having such a joke. Round they fly and round about, higher still and higher. Dearie me, the people say, a chimney on fire. You know the noise the wind makes? At night time now and then, it's just those naughty fairies, at their tricks again, sitting in the chimney, round and round in rows, singing all together and warming up their toes. Your mom was a hands-on mom. She did not have a mean bone in her body, and she had a kind word for everyone. She encouraged both of you in your endeavors and in pursuing your dreams. Laura, you recently attended a high school reunion and you ran into a friend you knew from your days when you were all the way back to elementary school. And the friend began speaking of your mother, and she shared her memories of going over to your house when you were little for lunch. She told you how she always looked forward to these lunches because your mom would go above and beyond, to make them so special. She would call them a ladies' lunch. She'd make little carrot curls, and she'd take chunks of bananas, put them on toothpicks, and dip them in all kinds of colored sugar. These moments were fun and whimsical because she was. These are words that really describe your mom so perfectly. You also knew a mom who was non-judgmental, and she possessed, as you said, a legendary sense of humor. She had a quick wit and her hilarious quips. She was delightful, a hoot, and always had an enormous love of life. Throughout the years, she stayed involved with PTA and NCJW. She was a longtime member of the Temple Tifereth Israel. When your father died in 1977, both of you were living in California, and Laura, you chose to move back home to Cleveland at this time to help your mom. And since that moment, you spend almost every day together. You were that mother-daughter duo in the JCC's aerobic class for 20 years. With you, Laura, living in Cleveland, and with Alice in California, Ruth decided that there would be 2 times a year when the 3 of you would meet up for some mother-daughter fun. Your mom declared the following. She said, Alice lives in California, and we live in Cleveland. Las Vegas is halfway. And so twice a year, the 3 of you would have your adventure in Las Vegas. It must have been the best of times. In recent years, your mom was living at Wiggins, and you saw her as a woman who was kind. That's how she was known there, to be kind and thoughtful, and she was one who treated people with respect, whether they were a prince or the person who swept the floors. At Wiggins, when anybody came by her room, maybe to bring her a meal, maybe some medication, maybe just to help her with something, she would always say to them the following before they left her room. She would say, be well, be healthy, be happy. And after a while, the phrase began to stick with everyone who knew her there. So if anyone at Wiggins saw Ruth in the dining room or in the hallway, they would jump on the opportunity to be the first one to say to her, Ruth, be well, be healthy, be happy. Alice and Laura, she was a best friend to both of you. And Laura, living in town, the 2 of you, you were partners in crime. She was your sidekick or you were hers. Your friends were her friends and her friends were yours. And this was a very, very special, special bond. 2 sisters, one out of town, one in town, both loving their mother tremendously. And Laura, with you being the in-town sister, and I know, Alice, you appreciate this from the depths of your soul, for these last 10 years especially, you have done everything you can to make sure her dignity was always protected. And this is a great gift as well. Her daughters wanted me to mention some other special helpers and caregivers. To Debbie and Becky and Mary and Jackie. These were Ruth's newest and closest family members, like best friends, girlfriends, and I hope the 4 of you know how much Ruth truly appreciated and adored you. Her son-in-law, Tom, shared with me that he had the best mother-in-law anyone could ever have. Tom, you said she had a great sense of humor, and that you and Alice, when you would go on vacation, you would take her with you. Not because you felt you had to, because she was fun. She was always in a pleasant mood, and you always had a good time with her. Tom, you also loved some of her sayings. She had these interesting little quips, Ruthisms. One of your favorites was when she would say, "We should have bought it when we couldn't afford it." Or she would say it's something else, maybe sing something else in a store. "It's too good to let a stranger have it." And her son-in-law, Howard, you said that in the 34 years you've known her, she never criticized you or discouraged you. You described her as a mother-in-law who was always 100% supportive of you and Laura. And you just loved watching her in her element. This is when she would be preparing those huge family meals, those big gatherings for holidays and other celebrations. Howard, you said she would start cooking weeks in advance and freeze certain dishes, and she would insist on schlepping all the tables and chairs herself. Wouldn't let anybody do it. She was amazing, you said. She never said no to you. Even when you asked to store your boat in her garage, which I think left Don's car now without a home, she allowed you to store your boat there. She was thrilled to do it for you. Friends, I have a number of quotes and memories to share with you from a collection of Ruth's nieces, nephews, great-nieces, great-nephews. And so I will do my best to make sure you know who these quotes and who these memories are from. Her niece Barbara remarked about her aunt's elaborate family meals. Aunt Ruth did something amazing, she did some amazing, even crazy things. When it came to presenting a meal, if she was preparing the chopped liver for Thanksgiving, it had to be presented just so, with the chopped liver in the shape of a turkey, and Fritos for the wings, and slices of red peppers for the snood that hangs from the beak. As Barbara and all the nieces and nephew know, your Aunt Ruth adored you. She adored you and your children, her great-nieces and great-nephews. They were like grandchildren to her, all of them holding a very special place in her heart. And other family members. Daniel, this is Don's grandson, Daniel wrote, "Hi, Grandpa. I'm very sorry to hear about Aunt Ruth. I'm glad I got the honor of sitting next to her at breakfast for so many years. I'll always have a lot of memories from that, and I don't think I ever have or ever will have a glass of orange juice without thinking of her raising a glass in good health, a votre santé." And that's from Daniel. Marilyn wrote some of her memories of Ruth were Aunt Ruth hosting a Memorial Day parade gala from her home on Silsby from the time Stuart, Sarah, and Daniel were babies. And this always included walking over to Geraci's for lunch. And Stuart said, in addition to the checkerboard cake and Thanksgiving chopped liver turkey, that must have been quite a turkey, or quite a chopped liver, Stuart wrote, "I always look forward to the Jell-O that she would bring. Orange and mint Oreos were my favorite." Apparently she made everyone's favorite Jell-O on or near their birthday and also for celebrations. Stuart said she also made the best matzo balls and potato kugel for Passover. Sarah's favorite memories, Aunt Ruth, with her Memorial Day parades, and of course going to Geraci's, the checkerboard cake, drinking chocolate phosphates at breakfast. Sarah said, "I never actually liked the taste of them. I just liked that Aunt Ruth made them for me, and it was special." Sarah also remembers Aunt Ruth's pet bird doing somersaults for a peanut. She goes on to say she remembers on Sundays when they would sit down for breakfast, they would compare manicures and earrings. And when Aunt Ruth asked me what kind of Jell-O she should make, I would always ask for the green minty one with Oreos. It was only a few years ago that Aunt Ruth told me that it was her least favorite flavor to make. Sarah remembers that her Aunt Ruth liked her bagels burnt, and she did not want orange juice. She remembered that Uncle Don's bird, I believe, Casey, would get mad every time Aunt Ruth walked by the cage, and Aunt Ruth would throw her hands up and say, "Okay, okay," something to try and calm down the bird. Aunt Ruth, according to Sarah, was not thrilled when breakfast was moved from 9 a.m. to 8 a.m. They did this for a few years. And Daniel would always call her to remind her when it was her turn to pick up bagels. There's a rumor in the family when Don would call breakfast for 8 o'clock, and whatever time it was, you had to be there 10 minutes early. She wasn't happy about this early hour, so she came one day in her robe to breakfast. And finally, Sarah remembers that Aunt Ruth would make these special cookies. The family called them hand cookies, and I guess there were also some feet cookies. But on the hand cookies, she would decorate these cookies with icing to make it look like rings and bracelets and nail polish. Quite elaborate, and the family loved these. Her niece Emily said that Aunt Ruth made a good apricot strudel, and she loved fruit. Apparently, Ruth had an obsession with fruit. Emily says, I saw her once eat a whole cantaloupe. She knit beautiful sweaters and puppet mittens. And I'm also told by members of the family that she would bake and mail apricot strudels to Emily in Maryland. Barbara, you also recalled that your Aunt Ruth loved Broadway musicals, and she had season tickets to the Broadway series for nearly 40 years. And Laura remembers that Ruth loved ballet as a kid. She was a graceful, agile young lady. And in more recent years, she even walked beautifully without a walker, until just 2 months ago. Laura said that she loved dance and music, and she always looked so many years younger than her actual age. She described her as generous to a fault. Laura says this fault, this trait, is one that both Ruth and her brother Don inherited from their parents. And last, her great-niece Susanna said, she took me to see all the Disney movies, Pocahontas, 101 Dalmatians. We would go to the mall and eat McDonald's, since my parents never brought me there. She even let me arrive back home to Grandma and Grandpa's house with 2 fish from the pet store one time. We would spend lots of time at her house feeding grapes to her bird and making him roll over. I always loved her lime green shag carpet that never changed over the years. Memorial Day parades out front of her house and twirling around in her basement in vintage cocktail dresses, calling her Aunt Whatchamacallit because I would have said Grandma so many times in a 2-week summer visit that out of habit I would call her Grandma. That's how I gave her the new name. She will be missed. Susanna is right. She will be missed. But she was so very blessed to have the family and friends that she knew in her 97 years. And with heavy hearts, but also joy mixed in with the tears, we join with the sages of our people as we declare Zichrona Livracha. We pray that the memory of Ruth Kimmelman will always be our blessing. Amen. We are taught that words which come from our heart enter directly to her heart. And at this time, baby brother Don has some words in his heart he wants to share with all of us.
I could tell a couple other stories, but I won't tell them.
No, you can tell them. Here you go. Right over here.
Baby brother, nothing. One thing that we haven't mentioned here, first of all, it's a waste of time listening to me because Cantor Siebel has said everything. And she didn't leave me any. Sorry. I didn't think you'd remember all those things, so you're good. Ruth was at 97, we calculate, was the oldest person in our related families. I don't know if anyone here knows anyone over 97, but she holds that honor. And in 3 months, 3 or 4 months, she would have been 98. So that was interesting. Cantor mentioned Sunday breakfast. That's a big thing at our house. For at least the last 40 years, we've been having Sunday breakfast with our family. close family. We invite others, but nobody else likes to get up at 9 o'clock. It's 9 o'clock now. And we do have rules there. We have to be there by 9. We lock the door at 9:05, and you're supposed to leave at 11, which they never do, because we have things to do. Ruth was a constant companion there and a highlight of breakfast. In later years, first I want to tell you, at Sunday breakfast, we not only eat well, but we have a word contest afterwards. We have a word book of interesting words, and we go around the circle and ask a word, and the winner who gets the most right gets a prize. We have a prize bag, and that sometimes creates a little fun. Ruth, though, in later years, was slowing up a little bit, but when her turn came to say a word, she would, and this was in a time when we weren't sure she knew everybody well, but she would go to the word and she would sound it out by the prefix, and this came from this French, and this one means this, and she was good until just a few months ago that she could do that. So this morning we had Sunday breakfast without her, and we all raised a glass of orange juice in her honor. The orange juice was because Laura, in her effort to keep Ruth hydrated in the last few years, found out that every time somebody got a word right, we would raise a glass and we all had to drink it with Ruth so she could drink her orange juice. So that will go on for years. My relationship with Ruth was actually like she was my second mother. 7 years apart, when you're 8 and she's 15, you're not her daily boyfriend, but you're also the one who takes you to the store and leads you around. Our relationship changed a lot when Max passed away, and from then on, I was closer with her, helping her with her daily business and her general activities, dealing with paying bills and other responsibilities. And we've been very close since then, especially. I was going to say something about her. Oh, yes. You talk about, I'm almost done. Well, good thing you did all yours, because I'd be still talking here this afternoon. What was I going to say? See, the baby brother. When she and Max got their first house, and the first time they lived with, when Max came out of the Army, they lived with us, and then they went on their own, and we were invited to see this apartment that they went into, and the apartment was small. It was so small that the single bathroom, if you wanted to do justice to what you went in there for, the door had to be open and your legs extended out straight from the door. My mother cried all the way home. And they were as happy as could be. And apparently everything worked there. So anyway, all I can say about the baby brother is that a votre sante for everyone. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Before we conclude the service, let me just share a couple brief announcements. The interment will be immediately following this service at the Mayfield Cemetery, and following the rites of burial. There will be a Shiva today and also tomorrow. Today will be at Wiggins, which, if you're not familiar with, is located at 27070 Cedar Road. This will be on the second floor in the multi-purpose area, and visitation will be after interment until 8 p.m. tonight. If you wish to visit with the family tomorrow, visitation will be at the Chronic Residence, which is at 2247 South Belvoir Boulevard in University Heights. And there's 2 visitation times. The first one is in the afternoon from 2 until 4 p.m., and then in the evening from 7 until 8:30. Anyone wishing to make a contribution in memory of Ruth, the family has asked that you might consider the Senior Transportation Connection. As you are able, I invite you now to rise for the memorial prayer, El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Amseimenu Chanechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'malot Kedoshim Utorim, Kezohar Arakim Asirim, Et Nishmat Yakirenu Shehalacha Leolama, Began Eden Techei Menuchata, Ahna Baharachamim Astirecha, B'seiter Knafech Le'olamim, V'titzror B'tzrorachayim Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, V'tanuach B'shalom, Al Mishkava V'nomar, Amen. O merciful God, who dwells on high, who is full of compassion, grant perfect rest beneath the shelter of your divine presence among the holy and pure, who shines as the brightness of the firmament. To our dear departed Ruth Kimmelman, who has gone now to her eternal home. May Ruth's soul be bound up in the bonds of eternal life. Grant that her memory inspire all of us to noble and consecrated living. And to this we say, Amen. You may be seated.